Well, welcome everyone. So pleased you could join us for a few minutes to talk a little bit about our AI governance paper produced through the PICCASO labs. I'd like to welcome all our fellow contributors who worked hard on pulling this together. And we're going to give you a quick run through of some highlights from this lab paper. So why AI governance? Well, it's particularly important right now for any professionals working in the data, information, security, compliance, risk governance space. And we recognized that there are some practical steps which would be usefully collated to help individuals and organizations kickstart their governance framework thinking. So this paper was really written by practitioners working in the space for other practitioners. It's meant to be a 0 to 1 guidance document. And for those out there who already feel like they're on their journey, feel free to take a look at the paper as well. You might get some useful ideas and tips. We have tried to think of it from a variety of different perspectives. We have, as contributors to this paper, lawyers, data ethicists, consultants, all of whom are working with different stakeholders to build data governance frameworks in different industry sectors. So the paper itself is broken up into a number of sections. We've tried to define risks. We've given practical guidance on controls, policies, procedures, and skills required to build the governance framework. The goal of the paper is to really give a sound platform for AI innovation, which can be built on and extended over time. And we are sharing examples from different industry sectors. We have also worked with PICCASO on a questionnaire, and we'll share with you at the end some of the results from the questionnaire. And we're grateful to the companies who participated in completing the questionnaire for us. We also have a data governance paper dedicated to helping individuals think about how you build general data governance frameworks, and we'll be sharing a bit more information on that at the end of this paper. So having said all of that, I'm going to hand over to my co-chair for this paper, Tim Roberts from AlixPartners.
Thanks, Janine. And as Janine says, we've talked about risks and we've talked about governance and controls, and the latter, the governance framework, is captured in this diagram, these concentric circles. At the heart of it is the strategy the firm takes to risk and compliance around AI. What risks is it exposing itself to with its AI strategy? Which laws and regulations does it need to comply with based on what it's trying to do with its AI strategy? Then around that, in the first concentric circle, what kind of oversight is it going to put in place of its AI use cases to monitor those risks? What policies, standards, controls, and procedures, the sort of basic infrastructure of risk management that needs to be in place? And how is it preparing for any incident or breach that may occur where data may be used inappropriately or may be leaked or vulnerabilities that might be created as a result of AI use cases? How will it prepare for and respond to those incidents? And then finally, in the outer circle, a set of foundational sort of monitoring and measurement capabilities, tracking its AI use cases and the risk that they generate, reporting on those, hopefully also reporting on the benefits being gained from AI as well as the risks, testing its AI use cases and its controls, and providing training and awareness to all of its people, recognizing that a lot of the controls, in inverted commas, needed here are human, not just procedural or technological. So this is the sort of framework at the heart of the paper, and it'll come to life with some of the examples we give. And we thought we would now turn to some of the other members of the writing team to discuss some of the thoughts that came to us as we were working on the paper.
Thanks, Tim. And so I'd like to turn first to Myrna McGregor, who has usefully provided lots of practical insights within the paper from her time spent at Ocado. And Myrna, you were very good at coining the phrase by practitioners for practitioners. And I'd like to get your thinking around the 0 to 1 approach, why we started with that, and perhaps any useful case studies that you can share around what Ocado have been doing.
Sure. So I think the benefit of coming together to write this paper is bringing together all of our experiences and expertise from across different sectors and working either within or with companies with very different maturity levels. And our sense was that it's such an evolving and complex space that it's very easy to get a bit lost or maybe a bit overwhelmed, particularly when you're starting out or you're trying to do a map of what you should be doing and what's missing in terms of your organizational governance approach. So it felt right to start from a 0 to 1 recommendation of how can we pull together what feels truly essential for every business looking to operationalize and exploit AI opportunities to have in place. And we had a really healthy debate, I think, amongst us about what those essentials needed to be. And we tried to slim them down as much as possible to make sure we were recommending something that felt practical and proportionate, aware that lots of different sectors will have lots of different requirements, but also risk-based as well, because that's the key lens with which you need to address AI governance. And we also allowed ourselves a bit of space to start listing some the next phase of maturity of once you've got to that one, what else might you want to do? But it felt really key to help organizations identify the absolute core essentials, because I think a lot of the literature perhaps is a bit expansive and a bit intimidating in that sense. So one of the things that we at Ocado got in as part of our core essentials was an AI registry. We kicked this off quite a few years ago, originally as a way of trying to track what teams were working on, and evolved it into a much more expansive tool to try and track everything that is going on across the business. And the key to this is you can't manage what you're not aware of. So you need to have one single asset where your entire organization's AI use cases are tracked. And this has multiple benefits. One, it's a great knowledge tool. So you can start from opportunity identification. Do you have gaps in terms of where you want to be using AI? You can apply a risk lens of what AI use cases feel particularly risky. Antonis will talk a little bit around classifications of different AI risks later. And then it's also where you kickstart your governance, because what you need to list is not only what the use case is, where it's applied, potentially what geography it's applied in, but also who the owners of this use case are, who you contact if you've got questions about it, and how operational it is. Is it in production? Is it in development? And you can really start to build a good picture of what's going on and to layer on more from there.
Brilliant. Well, shall we turn now to ask Antonis a question? And Antonis, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what kind of risks are your clients most concerned about, or should they be most concerned about, and what steps should they be taking to mitigate them?
Thank you, Tim. So the answer is, AI presents all these amazing opportunities, but like everything else, it comes with significant risks. And being a relatively novel technological development, it presents some novel risks as well. So what we did in the context of the paper, following passionate discussions with the writing team, was to group the risks basically in two broad buckets: new risks created by AI, and also existing risks that businesses face when using technology, which are compounded by AI. I think for the purposes of this brief webinar, it makes sense to focus on the new risks that are created by AI without wanting to underestimate the existing ones. So, and in each of these buckets, we further grouped risks into operational, technical, human, and of course, legal risks. So just to give some examples of the novel risks created by AI, on the operational side, the big theme is safety. And of course, risks always depend on the particular context, but safety would become an issue, for example, when AI is used in contexts that have implications in the physical world. Think smart vehicles, for example, think aviation. So obviously safety is a big item, which is also why it's considered to be high risk under emerging legislation in the EU and elsewhere. Then we have a set of technical risks that are created by AI. The big themes there are the so-called data quality problem which links to the quality of the outputs. There's this maxim in AI governance around if you put rubbish in, rubbish will come out. So it's all about the data. And there the solution is we fall back on good old-fashioned data governance, good data controls and hygiene to make sure that the AI performs well. And of course, the big problem with generative AI is hallucinations, where really we don't have solutions at this stage, but we keep working at improving the quality through improvements we make on the data side. And then, of course, you have the technical problems that emerge, things like drift within our models. So the models degrade as time goes by, and therefore the performance of the AI degrades at the same time. The solution there is constant monitoring of the AI in order to make improvements when required. When it comes to human risks, the big themes there are bias. It's the natural phenomenon of, because AI is programmed by humans, there's a tendency that we code our biases into AI. And the solution is human oversight in order to try to mitigate the impact of any bias in the real world. But of course, human oversight also comes with its own problems because it has got to be applied at the right stage. If we don't apply it at the right stage, then it won't mitigate the risk. And then finally, and I think I'll conclude with that, looking at the legal risks, which you would expect a lawyer to raise, we do have an emerging complex regime around AI, the specific laws around AI that are emerging around the world, but also existing laws that, like those concerning data protection or cybersecurity, intellectual property, continue to apply. And the cumulative effect of all that is a really complex legal regime with many novel concepts and scarce guidance when it comes to these novel concepts. So there is naturally a legal and regulatory complexity risk there. The solution there is relatively simple. Rely on your in-house legal departments, work with your good lawyers, try to come up with practical solutions. And to finish it all off, we have what I call velocity risk, which is at the same time as we have these risks and this legal and regulatory complexity, we also have a lot of speed in everything we do. Our business wants to roll out AI really, really quickly. The technology is changing very rapidly. The legal regime is also evolving very, very rapidly. So that needs to be managed through good governance controls. And in order to get some practical examples as to how you do this in practice, I'll pass over to Odvar and Lauren in the BT team.
Brilliant, thanks, Antonis. So on that, exactly that point, Lauren and Odvar, can you say a bit about the BT experience in practice and what motivated your thoughts that you shared in the paper?
Yes, of course. So like Antonis says, there are lots of risks that are associated with specific AI use cases. So one of the things that was really important for us at BT was to make sure that we had the right processes in place to be able to identify what those risks are and then to build in appropriate controls and guardrails wherever we were able to do so. So at BT, we leveraged our impact assessment processes, which we already had in place to cover data, so to ensure that we were able to use those to assess any legal and ethical risks arising from AI use cases. And as we explain in a bit more detail in the risk management in practice section of the paper, the risks and required controls for each use case will differ depending on whether we're procuring the AI from a third party, whether we're developing it internally, whether we're using it ourselves, or whether we're selling it to a customer. And in most cases, it will be a combination of those things. So for example, we might be procuring an open source LLM, we might be developing it slightly, so fine-tuning it or pointing it at certain data sets, and then we might be using it internally. So we'd need to consider the relevant risks that are applicable for all of those things and build in controls in order to deal with that. So an example of what those risks might be, so when we're procuring or buying AI from a third party, then we're likely to have less control over how that AI was originally trained. So it's really important that we undertake our appropriate due diligence and that we have the relevant contractual safeguards to try and ensure that we have the protections as a business when we're procuring that AI. Conversely, when we're developing AI ourselves, we are likely to have a bit more control. So it's more the good controls and guardrails that we'd look to have in place in that case would be to make sure that the right people are involved at the right time, so that we're able to assess how that AI is being trained and how it's being developed. When we're using the AI internally, we would need to understand what the potential risks are from that use. So we'd be considering the outputs of the AI, the potential for bias, inaccuracy, harm for individuals, some of the things that Antonis was talking about, and then how we deal with that. So guidance on how the business should actually use that AI. And then finally, when we're selling AI, we'd need to consider what contractual guarantees we can give to our customers and what additional information we can give to our customers to enable them to comply with their obligations. So I'll hand over to Oddvar, who I think is going to talk through a specific example.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So one of the examples we called out in the paper was our deployment of Amazon Q Developer, which is basically an AI-powered coding assistant. And following the risk management framework that we talked about, one of the things we really had to focus on is what training data was used in the system. Obviously, to generate code, you need to give it lots of code to actually generate those recommendations. And when we started working with Amazon to understand what code was being used to train the model, what they told us is that there's a combination of both proprietary code that Amazon owned and a lot of open source code that they sourced from various parts of the internet. Now, when we think of the risks of using all of this training data for the outputs that we want to use, we obviously were a bit concerned with the system generating and providing our developers with open source code due to the legal issues around how we provide attributions of that code. So what we had to do to manage that risk in practice was actually work with Amazon to disable the use of open source code in the training data. And obviously that was just based on our position and our risk assessment at the time, and that would change depending on your risk tolerance, but that's how we tackle the issue of training data. Then thinking of once we deploy the tool within the organization, bearing in mind we have about 20,000 people that were going to be using the coding assistants, we really had to make sure that they understood the risks and limitations of the technology. So we focused quite a lot on getting the right training program, which included making sure that everyone that had access to the platform undertook a high-level training course that explained those risks, the opportunities, and also they had to complete a quiz. So basically, you couldn't get access to the tool unless you completed the quiz, which obviously helped ensure that people understood how to use the tool safely and securely.
And they had to be a certain level of responses right for that quiz, to pass that quiz. Okay, moving on to Catherine, and I was just reflecting as we were going through these questions. We've had some lawyers answer some questions, some consultants. We've had an AI ethicist, and now we've got a data scientist, which is Catherine. And I wanted to know what you think is the biggest risk, and is it the risk of becoming paralyzed, or is it inaction versus action? Where do you see the risk? And also, what do you think successful implementation looks like?
Thank you very much, Janine. So that's a great question. We've heard a lot about the downside risks that emerge through AI, and they're all incredibly important and real, and organizations need to take them into account. But at the same time, for many organizations, there's also a tremendous risk of inaction, of not taking advantage of AI and the opportunities that arises, and from frankly being left behind by competitors as a result. Now, governance, when done well, will be an enabler. It'll be an accelerator for the business to achieve more with AI in a safe way. Done badly, it can be a hindrance that ties an organization up in treacle, or even worse, it can cause an organization or prevent an organization from taking, cause an organization to take actions which sort of frankly are a maverick or going to be dangerous. So I think for me, success is really about steering the organization in a way that charts that right course, enables the organization to move as fast and safely as possible to drive the benefits, whilst protecting from all of the downsides that we've described. How to do that? Well, I think for me, step one actually is to engage the organization, to understand who the stakeholders are, identify the types of risks that are real, make sure the business understands the risks that might materialize as a consequence of AI, both upside, both in terms of risk of not getting the benefits and in terms of the risks of privacy or hallucination, for example. Secondly, Myrna's already spoken about the essential nature of an inventory. Have a log of what AI is in the business and have critically a named individual against each of those. So you know who in the business is accountable and responsible for the outcomes that any AI is achieving. And then very importantly, be really conscious as a business around what the consequences are of different risks. How serious would it be? And think about that in the context of your risk appetite as an organization and tailor your governance accordingly. So for example, there are many applications of AI, many use cases where the consequences of something going wrong might be relatively minor. They might be small. You might decide, therefore, actually, the right approach is to be willing to make mistakes, let things go wrong, explicitly have them as part of your testing and learning approach, if that makes sense. And in those circumstances, you can move quite quickly. You can have a light touch governance structure that enables you to move fast. In fact, I see many organizations successfully, almost deliberately prioritizing and sequencing their AI in a way that enables them to learn as much as possible quickly, starting with the lower risk things. But by contrast, of course, there are many areas of AI where there really are serious consequences if something goes wrong. And in those circumstances, you absolutely need much tighter controls. You need to have the checks and balances in place, and the right thing to do is to have an organization move slower and to work through those as well as they can. So for me, the successful organizations are the ones that actually don't have a single track for governance. They have an approach which allows them to triage and send different types of activity through the appropriate route, which enables the things that can to move quickly to deliver benefit and to learn as much as possible whilst protecting the organization for the things that can go wrong.
That's great. Thank you so much, Catherine. And Tim, we have the benefit as well of a survey, which I referenced earlier, which PICCASO put out to industry. And we asked a number of questions. And we had 55 companies come back and give us their thoughts on where they are, where they see the risks, what they're doing around governance. And I thought it was interesting to see that we've had a lot of early adopters. There are a lot of companies, up to about 70% who completed the questionnaire saying, yes, they are embracing AI, and 72% of them said they already have a list of AI applications. But there were also some interesting observations around governance. Do you want to share some of those with us?
Yeah, thank you, Janine. I thought this was very interesting that, as you say, nearly 3/4 are clearly already active in using AI in their business. But then if you look at their responses to questions like, do you have an inventory of those AI applications? Only 21% does. If you look at, do they have a strategy for using AI? Only 38% does. So nearly twice as many are using AI than say they have a strategy for using AI. So this feels like some quite early, almost quite scrappy skunkworks type exploration, not with the kind of methodical strategy that we think is needed if you're going to do this sort of thing safely. Then if you look at some of the elements we've been talking about of governance, controls, skills, only half say they've got executive sponsorship for AI governance, so it doesn't reach right up to the top. If you look at who governs AI, it's quite a mixture, quite a mixture of IT, privacy, cyber, legal, and the numbers add up to more than 100%. So they're telling us more than one person governs AI, which might be right, but it's a bit of a mix. And if you ask, do you have the skills to manage AI? Only about a third say yes to that. And only about a third say they've identified the key AI risks. So it's very much a work in progress. So when we talked about this 0 to 1 phrase at the beginning, there's a lot of people that are in that journey from 0 to 1.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see what this looks like in a year's time. So hopefully we can run the survey again and see where industry is at that point. But for right now, I would encourage anyone who is listening to take a look at our paper. It's free. It's available on the PICCASO community site. And I would particularly like to thank the folk who appear on this webinar for being contributors, for giving up their evenings and weekends and spending a lot of time having some good debates, but also quite a few chuckles. I think I've definitely made a good bunch of friends through this process. And I would encourage others to get involved in PICCASO Labs in the future. If you'd like to be involved in other topical developments in the information, data, governance, security space, I would also like to call out the data governance paper, which is another lab. It's also available on the PICCASO community site, again, for free. You can download it, share it with your friends. And I think an interesting observation is for all of us who have worked on this paper, we actually use it every day to talk to the business and to pull thoughts and comments together. So it is a very good aide-memoire. So having said all of that, I'm going to wrap up and with goodbye, and enjoy reading it, and would love to hear from you. Give us any thoughts that you have. Thank you.